So first things first, what is your name?
My name is Ashley Dottie.
Awesome. All right, now our next question is, what tools do you use as a scientist?
So we use a lot of different tools. Um, some of the ones we use the most include a net, some hooks. Sometimes we need a boat, a tape measure, lots of sunscreen. Those are the most important ones.
Okay. Pretty common things. All right. Now, when did you become interested in science? What got you into science to begin with?
I was interested in science when I was really young. So I think it kind of started out that I was really interested in animals. And so when I was younger, I really wanted to be a vet when I was older. And I worked at a vet when I was in high school and was mostly interested in things like cats and dogs. And then I started um, scuba diving, which I'll talk to you about more later with some photos. But I started seeing animals underwater and thought they were really cool and wanted to know more about them.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, I had a very similar experience. I grew up on the coast, and so exploring reefs and different areas were kind of my childhood. All right, the next question is, where do you do the majority of your work? A location like geographically, or like a lab or in the field?
So a lot of my work is in the field. If anyone knows the reference of the Big Bend of Florida, so the big curve along the west side of the coast, that's where I do most of my work. And usually I'm out on the water, so all throughout the Big Bend.
Awesome, okay. The last question before we announce what you do is, why do you think that your work is important?
So without revealing exactly what I do, we learn a lot about different species and the things that influence how they behave and how healthy their populations are. And so, unless we do this work, we might not really know because some of the things are under the water. And so, unless you go out of your way to investigate those things, you're not really going to know if they're changing, and if they are, how they're changing.
Awesome, you did a really good job of explaining that without giving too much away. So hopefully you have a decent amount of guess. If you want to go ahead and put that in your notebook now, I'll give you all a few seconds. And yeah, Ashley, if you'd like to go ahead and show off what you got.
Yeah, I have a
Let me
little
go ahead and
slideshow.
let me go ahead and give you permission to share your screen.
All right. Oops, I don't want to do that. Okay, so you may have guessed it since I talked a lot about the water and diving, but I am a marine ecologist, which is under the field of marine biology. So I see in the chat Miss O'Brien predicted that pretty well. I may have given it away when I said I needed a boat and like to look at fish. But I'm a marine ecologist, which means that obviously it's marine oriented. I'm studying things that live in the water, mostly in estuaries, which is where rivers run out and meet the ocean. So it's kind of this mixture where some areas have a lot of fresh water and some have a lot of salt water. And within ecology, I'm looking at what different species are around and what affects how they move and what they do, and maybe what type of fish preys or eats another. And so that's the main focus of my work. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I got there. So I'm actually a student. I'm a master's student in college. So I go to Florida State University in Tallahassee, if anyone is familiar with this area. And You may know if you've been here that Tallahassee is not on the coast, but we do have a marine lab, which is about an hour south of here, and that is on the coast. So a lot of my work is not actually done at FSU, but it's done at our marine lab, which is down in Panacea, which you probably don't know where Panacea is, but it's pretty close to Apalachicola. So if anyone's ever eaten oysters or your family's eaten oysters, they probably come out of Apalachicola. So like I told you all, I mainly got interested in marine type of science when I started scuba diving. So I got certified in middle school, so I'm not sure how old all of you are, but some of you may be in middle school. And you're not too young if you are to start looking at the underwater world if it's interesting to you. But here are some different photos. So in Florida, there's a lot of really cool places around to go explore. We have a lot of freshwater springs that are really awesome. And then of course, if you're on the coast, there's a lot of really awesome stuff in the ocean too. So I've been diving for quite a while. You can see in this bottom left photo, it's a really big school of fish that we saw off of our marine lab. This top middle photo is of a coral reef in the Keys. So some of you may be further south and be close to the Keys. And there's a lot of really cool coral reefs down there. Yeah, so there's a lot of really, really awesome places to explore. And when you get a little bit older, you can even become a scientific diver, which means that you do science underwater. So that's what I am now, but this is a photo up here of us doing some training to become underwater scientists. So one thing that I was really interested in specifically was the behavior of animals underwater. So I would see a lot of things and then have a lot of questions about what they were doing or why they were doing it. And so behavior became a really big thing for me to be interested in. And I'm actually from Georgia, so I grew up in Atlanta, which is not close to the water. So I wasn't really able to just go to the coast or go to a spring and watch how some of these animals were behaving. So if anyone's ever been to Atlanta or been to the Georgia Aquarium or know where it is, I actually volunteered there for a while when I was in high school because I wanted a place to go and look at fish and see what they were doing and think about why they might be doing that. And so a lot of it was just me wondering why they were doing what they were doing. And if anyone's ever been to an aquarium or seen fish or any animals out in the wild, you might wonder what they're doing or why are they doing that? That looks kind of weird. So that was a really big thing that I enjoyed doing. And eventually, after I started college, I actually for a while was an aquarist, which means that I worked at different aquariums and my job was to take care of different animals. So that doesn't just mean that you're feeding them, but you're having to take care of their entire exhibit that they live in. We do training with them so that when we need to do like a checkup, a medical procedure, or anything like that, that they're trained and they know what to do. And so for a while, I spent my time working as an aquarist. And so when you do that, you're also seeing a lot of behavior happen. A lot of the job is doing training, like I said. And so you're actually learning about how animals learn, which is really cool. Some people don't expect it, but fish are really, really intelligent. And the stuff that you're able to train them to do is pretty amazing. Just like you can train your dog to do really cool tricks, you can also train fish to do really cool things and swim through tunnels and come up to a certain sign that they recognize. And so I spent a good amount of time doing that. And my particular field of expertise is working with sharks and rays. And so when I worked at the aquariums, I was mostly taking care of sharks and rays, and now that I am a scientist, I study sharks and rays. And so those are kind of my specialties. Those are my favorites. So these are just some of my sharks and rays that I've worked with over my years working in aquariums. So if anyone has been on the coastline, you maybe have seen really big fields of seagrass. So it's super pretty. It's really green. This is actually taken right off of our marine lab on a really clear day. It's usually not that clear where you can just see all the patches of grass out there. But there are seagrass habitats that are pretty much all the way down the Big Bend, so along the Gulf of Mexico. And there are a lot of really cool different species of fish that live in the seagrass. And so it's not just big fish. There are tiny little things like sponges and crabs and shrimp and things like that that you can see in a seagrass bed. And so my lab, since I study out of the marine lab and we are right near all these seagrass beds, we do a lot of work looking at what lives in these areas and how that changes during the year. So sometimes fish might leave for a certain amount of time. Maybe in the winter they want to go south where it's warmer, and then they'll come back. And so we just kind of monitor how the different species, the different community is changing throughout the year. And so these are just some photos of some of the things that we catch in our survey that we do and different times of the year. So in the winter, a lot of the sharks go somewhere that it's warmer. So we don't catch a lot of sharks in the winter, but we do get schools of really big fish like red drum and black drum. So that's what you see in this photo in the top left. It's a really big red drum and they're really cool. So I think it's really interesting to kind of monitor one area and see how much it changes throughout the year. And that's what we do. So when we are catching these fish, we are using a gill net, which is a really long net that basically one side of it is really heavy, and so it drops down in the water, and then the other side floats. So it basically makes a little wall, and whatever is swimming can't see it, so it catches the fish, and then we see what all is in there after we bring it back onto the boat. And we also put out long lines, which are just a really long line that has a lot of different hooks on it that catches other types of fish. So usually we catch smaller fish in the net and some bigger fish on the line. So we see a really wide range of animals, which is pretty cool. So my lab, we do a whole bunch of different things other than just the fishing in the seagrass. So here are some photos that you can see. And we also catch a lot of different sizes of animals. And so the two pictures on the bottom are baby sharks that we've caught. So this one does not look like a baby because it's pretty big, but if you've ever seen a tiger shark or a photo of a tiger shark, they get super big, and this is what a baby looks like, and they're super adorable, and I got really excited when we caught that. So we do fishing all throughout Apalachicola Bay. We fish down in the Keys, and pretty much all down the Big Bend. So we go to a lot of areas and do a lot of different things. Another thing that our lab does is we do deep sea surveys. And so pretty much the same thing that we do in the seagrass, but we do it really far out in about 2,000 meters of water. So it's really, really deep. And we catch some really unique things that you might not ever see if you weren't in really deep water. And so for that, we take out a really big boat and we go out for a week or two at a time and fish far out. So the further out you get from shore, the deeper the water gets. And once you get into really deep water, you start catching completely different things. So this top middle picture is from one of our deep sea trips that we did this year. And another thing that we look at is the behavior of different fish. And so we do telemetry, which is a fancy word for tracking, where we track different sharks and see what they're doing across time and where they go. So this top left, the first photo on here is a photo of us doing a small surgery to put a tracker in a bull shark, and then we will see where it goes. And so for my personal work, the things that I'm researching right now mostly are that. So they are tracking different species to see where they go. And it is really rewarding work, and it's also a lot of time in the field. So if you like being outside, field work and research is a great thing to do because you are seeing firsthand what it's like to be out in these different places of nature. So if you see the photo that's on this slide, the main photo that's the background is our boat that we take. So for my undergraduate thesis, we would go out and track, and we would follow an animal for 52 hours at a time. So almost 2.5 days we're out on this boat, and it's really cool because you are actually following the shark with the boat. And you do that because, like you see in this first photo, we have a little receiver, which is basically just something that can pick up the detection from the tag that we put in the shark. And so the tag in the shark sends out a noise that our receiver picks up, and we can see which way it's going. So we do that for 52 hours and we follow it around. And it's really awesome because you are actually out there following this animal around, and you're seeing everywhere it goes, and you know everything it's doing. And so it's really interesting work, especially if you're interested in things like behavior, because you are seeing firsthand where these things are going. And so I think it's really awesome because you're providing information that other people might not know yet, and you are getting to firsthand see what these different animals are doing. And so that's what interests me the most. I'm interested in behavior. So once we see where these animals are going, then later we can go back and try to figure out why they're doing that. So maybe they are doing something different at different tides, or maybe at night they are doing something different than they're doing during the day. And so getting this type of data helps us figure out what drives them to do what they do, which is pretty interesting. So as a marine biologist, you can do a whole bunch of things. This is really specific. So even if you're interested in something like sharks, there are lots of different questions that you can ask. This is just specifically what I do. But there's a really, really wide range of things that you can do. And all of those things are really important, because if you don't go out and go out of your way to find this information, then no one will ever know what these animals out here are doing, especially because marine animals, you're not really just going to see unless you try. It's not like something like an elephant that's really huge and you can just watch it and see what it's doing. You have to kind of go out there and get creative. So if you like being creative and problem solving and things like that, then marine research is a really awesome field to go into. So with that, I'll see if anyone has any questions.
While I'm waiting for them to get questions, I'm really glad that you brought up estuaries towards the beginning, because on on Tuesdays for the after school program, we do a water quality test where we go and track water from Marion County until it reaches the ocean. Well,
awesome.
we're reaching the end of that journey, which happens to be near estuaries. So hint, hint for next week, for all my kids, next week's estuaries. Another question I had, or kind of a question I had for you is, sharks and stingrays seem very different. Why would you group them together? What makes them similar?
Yeah, so sharks and rays are in a group of animals called elasmobranchs. So you guys have learned about elasmobranchs before, or if you haven't, the thing that makes them different from other types of fish is actually their skeleton. So they don't have bones like we do per se, but they have still vertebrae. So they have something that looks like a spine, just like we have, except theirs is made out of cartilage. So they're actually, they're very flexible, which is to their benefit. It helps them be more agile in the water. But sharks are actually, or elasmobranchs, sharks and rays, they're a really old group of animals. So they just have been around since before species have evolved to actually have solid bones. So that's kind of what makes them different. They are considered fish. They're just cartilaginous fish instead of bony fish.
Right. That was the grouping I was hoping you were going to mention. All right. So first question is, how many different types of sharks are there in the ocean?
Oh, wow. That's a really great question. So I would actually have to double check this because there are hundreds, but it actually is still increasing pretty constantly. So especially as people do more deep sea research, then there are a lot more species that are still being discovered. Every few months, I'd say there's probably a new species or two discovered, but I believe the most current number is in the 400s. I'd have to double check that though.
I figured it was somewhere around there as well. All right, the next question is, at night, do you dive and catch animals sometimes?
So we don't usually dive at night for our research at least, but I have gone diving at night and it's really interesting because you see a lot of different animals at night than you would see during the day. So the night dives I've done were in South Florida, so they're actually in the Keys. But there are a lot of species that might hide during the day but come out at night, and then also opposite of that, a lot of species will hide at night because they don't want to be eaten. So going back to sharks a lot of the times will actually hunt at night because they don't need to be able to see to find their prey items. So they can actually detect things like movement because they can detect electrical fields in the water. And so sometimes fish will hide at night to avoid getting eaten by a shark. So it does change pretty significantly what you see during the night and during the day.
That's pretty neat. Do you ever catch water animals? I know your job as a marine biologist, but just a curious question.
Do we only catch water animals? So yeah, pretty much. Since we're fishing and we put our gear in the water, we usually just catch marine animals, but sometimes you see some interesting things. The things that like to follow us around the most are seabirds. So seagulls will come and try to steal our bait and things like that. So we don't catch the birds, but we do see a lot of birds while we're out, which is pretty neat.
Is it often that you find sea turtles going into your gill nets or anything?
Not usually. So it seems like turtles are, since they're usually swimming on the surface and our net has floats at the top, they usually can see that and not get stuck in it. We do see turtles sometimes, sea turtles, but no, we don't usually catch turtles.
All right, next question is, how long does it take to become an underwater scientist?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think the first step is to be able to scuba dive. So becoming a scuba diver can take anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months, but it really just depends on how close together you want to do everything. So there's some things you have to learn, and then you'll practice diving a couple times out in the water. And so that's what takes the longest, is becoming a diver. And then once you're a diver, you can take a scientific diving course. And I did that at FSU when I was a sophomore, so during my undergraduate, and it took a semester. So it was a semester long course that we did, and we did different dives throughout.
And that is on top of your scientific background as well. So 4 years of college, then I'm assuming 2 years of master's.
Yeah, so I took the science diving course as an undergraduate. So it was actually not too long after I started college, but I believe there's other places that do courses other than just universities, but I'm not actually sure if there's like what the minimum age is. It may be that you need to be in college.
All right, well, I'm going to twist the next question a little bit. And what is the largest thing that you have caught before?
Ooh, so I believe it would have been, we did a deep sea trip in the fall, so not too long ago, and we caught a 6-gill, which is a really big deep sea species of shark. And so I believe that was the biggest thing that we've caught with me on board, which I know my advisor has caught bigger 6-gills than the one that I saw, but that's probably the biggest species that we have caught so far.
I've been a part of catching many a shark, but 6-gill has definitely not been one of them. So kudos to you. All right, well, I think that's the end of the questions. So thank you for joining us today. And if I get any more questions, I'll probably pass them on to you later on.
Yeah, feel free to share my email, or you can pass them on from yours.
All right, awesome. Well, have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.